any further ado, please welcome Marshall.
I guess I'm talking to family because only 2 people raised their hands that said they didn't know me. But thank you for being here. This first slide is a piece I did. It's up at Block 4 Gallery, which is 2 blocks over on Long and 6th. So if you haven't had a chance to get by there, I got some Block 4 family in here. It's a great space where artists are doing some great things. But I put that up first so that you know that I'm an artist and I do art, because the rest of my presentation is not so much about the art that I do or, the design work. So this is how I'll go. The first couple of slides, no. All right. I'll get this back up in a second, but I'll go through just a little bit about my background for those 2 people who don't know who I am, and some of the work I've done in the last maybe 10 years or so in Columbus. And then I think the last part will be just kind of a special treat and something I've been preparing for a while. And I thought HOLLER was a great venue to introduce this project. And thanks for Sky Woods for allowing this platform. We do one event, big event a year with Creative Control Fest for 1 day or 2 days. And it takes us like a whole year just to get, half a year just to recover, and then like the next half of the year just trying to get ready for that one event. So I can't imagine doing a series of events over 31 days back to back at multiple venues, managing multiple people. So hats off to you, sir. With Crate Digger, I was gonna say cue some music up while I get this going, but if you give me a few minutes, a few seconds to just kind of log back in, so you can see the screen.
That's what I'm saying now.
Right, that's why I knew that was a good.
Scott asked me to play music, he paid me.
So many of you know the work I do. Today I just want to love on I love people, but today I really want to love on Black people and Black artists. So I just want to tell you that I love you. We don't hear that enough. I love what you create, and I love what Columbus is doing and Black artists in Columbus are doing. So thank you for really coming out. I'm gonna start off with a couple quotes, and I'll get some context later on in the presentation. But a few years ago I was doing some studies, and I came across a writing that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote. And in that essay, he talks about artist propaganda. And that is also in part why I showed the piece. Because as Black artists, what we create ultimately becomes propaganda for who we are. And propaganda gets a bad name, and we don't look at it as a tool for telling stories. And so I thought this was really befitting. And if you know anything about Du Bois' work, he does say he don't give a damn about art that is not propaganda. But this was written in 1926. So I thought it was really very relevant. I'll let you all sort of digest that. I won't read it back to you because I'm sure everybody in here is literate. Unless somebody does want me to read it out loud to them. Somebody might be vision impaired or something like that. So I do want to be sensitive to that. Okay. Thus, all art is propaganda, and ever must be. Despite the wailing of the pursuits, I stand in utter shamelessness, and that whatever art I have for writing has been used always for propaganda, for gaining the right of Black folk to love and enjoy. I do not care a damn for any art that is not used for propaganda, but I do care when propaganda is confined to one side, while the other is stripped and silent. Next quote is by Larry Neal, and this is really, one of the driving inspirations, and I'll tell you, I'll share where that inspiration came from in a few slides, but it says the Black arts movement is radically opposed to any concept of the artist that alienates him from his community. Black art is the aesthetic and spiritual sister of the Black power concept, and this was written in 1968 during the heart and middle of the Black power movement, which was birthed out of the civil rights movement. And so he wrote this essay in critique, or as sort of a part of the BAM movement, which is the Black arts movement that was really tied, closely connected to the Black power movement. So, Holler. Again, this is where I was supposed to thank Scott. But I do believe in giving credit and honor where honor is due. And Scott, I don't know if you realize the gravity of what you've done, and in this platform, I haven't been excited about a lot of stuff, but this, I really get excited. I really was excited about this and blessed to participate in it. But I thought it was very befitting, and so today my presentation will really be a holler. And I hope that it resonates with you. So thank you. All right, everybody repeat this. Love is black.
Love is black.
Black is love.
Black is love.
Love is black.
Love is black.
Black is love.
Black is love.
I love you all, okay? All right. So you know anything about black folks, we do call and response. You know, I need to know y'all here with me, y'all in the room, and I want you all to know that I love you. And black people love each other, and we love people. So remember that as you go on. But this term is something that I use. I got married in July. And you know, that is something of a term of endearment and that was kind of the theme for our wedding. But it really came from, we went to see Motown, the musical, a few years back. And it was just something in that play that resonated with us. And we just kept hearing this term black used as a term of endearment to between like Berry Gordy and Diana Ross and some of the other characters. And I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and home of the world champion Cleveland Cavaliers and the world champion in losing, Cleveland Browns. But we still strong, you know, we still here, we're still standing. And so we kind of adopted that language for ourselves, you know. By mere virtue of calling each other black, we're saying we love each other. And so oftentimes my friends will hear me and my wife call each other black. But that's really what we're saying. It's affirming our love for each other. And so I wanted to bring that into the space today and call you black because I love you. You know what I mean? And I really thank you for being here. But this is me. So before I'm an artist, I'm a husband, I'm a father. That's my little man and standing next to me with his fist the highest. He's not here today, but I'm sure you all will get a chance to meet him at some point. But I'm also a designer. I run a company called Artfluential, formerly Solo Theory Creative. And so I make things. I communicate through visual media, and that's how I make my living. And I also have a book with my good friend Javier called From This Moment On. I co-authored with him. Give it up. And I have copies for sale today after this is over. So a lot of people don't necessarily know what I do, and that's sort of bad branding on my part. People don't know I'm an artist, whether I'm a designer, whether I just organize events or what. So I'm kind of giving a brief synopsis of what I do on a day-to-day. 10 years ago, 2008, I graduated from Columbus College of Art and Design in 2006. And then, you know, you're young, you're out in the club scene, and you know, trying to do the young professional thing, and you know. And so was looking for opportunities to start to foster interaction with art that I wasn't necessarily seeing in the Columbus community. I had been a part of art events before, and a lot of times that just involved me showing pictures at a concert. And so after looking a few places, I reached out to Eric, I think was one of the first, and Taisha of course was there, but Eric was one of the first people like that wasn't tied to my hip and connected with me intimately like that in a relationship, and said, hey, I got this idea of doing this paint by numbers event And Charity's not here today, and we contacted her. So this was before Paint and Sip, because I get a lot of people that come to me now like, we want to do a Paint and Sip, and I was like, that's not what we do, right? And we started this event called the Brush Experience, right? And a lot of people don't know, but Taisha came up with the name, but BRUSH is actually an acronym for Black, Renaissance, Urban, Sophisticated, and Hip. And we wanted to present this event as an opportunity to expose the Black community to the making of art so that they can grow appreciation for art. We don't necessarily have collectively the disposable income to invest in art. And sometimes we just don't know the value of it or what goes into making it in the process. And so we wanted to kind of fuse that scenario with people who aren't necessarily artists, but give them the opportunity to make art, and have artists who are actually making art and who are professional artists on display. And you know, I take credit for Eric and Renee getting married, because that's kind of where they budded their love. But, you know, we'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary of the Brush Experience in 2018. It was started in the King Lincoln, before the bridge, before nobody was looking at it. I've had plenty of stories of people saying, why is Marshall bringing us down here to 21st and Long or 17th and Long to this venue? But for me, it was a very important that it was in that neighborhood, and you know, Charity really gave us an opportunity, and since then it's created more and more opportunities for us to really grow. And I can really honestly say that is where, you know, my feet got wet and I really started doing the work that I do. And then out of that birthed Creative Control Fest. So, you know, it's great to be social. I'm a designer by trade. Me and Corey are both graphic designers. We both went to CCAD together. But you find those spaces are very homogenous. They're very white, male driven. And so when we were going out and professionally trying to get into, you know, doing the things we're supposed to do, right? Go to conferences and join organizations related to your professional organizations, we just sometimes found ourselves being the only ones in that space. We went to one conference in Cleveland, I won't say the name, and we could talk more about it, but we were literally at the mixer just having a drink, and we could see people across the room planning to come around and talk to us because they were so surprised that we were in the room at this creative conference. And so we decided that, you know, one, there wasn't something that addressed, that was similar to this in Columbus, and Columbus has so much creativity. And then we went to a school where there was just a wealth of talent going out into the world. And we felt like, you know, because of that, just the connections we had in that small pool of people, that we could pull off a small conference and bring those people back in to talk about their experiences in these spaces. And so that is kind of where the Creative Control Fest was birthed. And then from that idea and that inception, we just really called on community and hit up Speak. I hit up Josh, Ty, O-Sharp, so many people in the room, Javier, to say we got this idea because we really want to see more people of color thriving within these industries. And even if we can't get them jobs, they need to see what opportunities are available to them, right? And with that doesn't mean that every speaker is black, because not every person that is black is in a position in the industry. And so we really work with a really diverse group of people around the city, and we've been, you know, really honored and blessed. Marshawn was very instrumental in us starting. Tom Burrell is Advertising Hall of Fame for advertising. He was one of the first advertisers to promote black products positively in media. And when we met him, Speak was supposed to be in his book called Brainwashed. And I love to tell this story because it was really where, you know, me and Marshawn and Speak really bonded. But Speak was supposed to be in his book in a number of years before that, and I had his book for a couple of years, and Speak, you know, kind of dropped the ball. It wasn't in the book, and I was like, man, you know, you need to reach out to him because this is one of the cats I really look up to in my industry. And he was reticent, and I said the worst they could do is say no, right? And so he reached out, and surprisingly, Tom Burrell remembered him, and I was like, okay, we got to go. And so he put that together, and I mean, we went from one of his speaking engagements at a school, we get up on the road, no money. We picked up Marshawn and we got on the road and went to Chicago to meet Tom Burrell. Now, he's loaded. And we were like kids in a candy shop when we went into his downtown condo in Chicago. But Marshawn brought him to tears with a poem that he spoke. And it was just a true testament to how powerful he was as just a human being and a person. And, I thought that was, as I was going through pictures, it just reminded me of that moment. And he requested Marshawn present before he went and came and spoke at our event. And so that is the things that have we built over the time of doing these events and Creative Control Fest. Unique Jones Gibson of Because of Them We Can, and countless others, both locally and nationally, have really supported what we do on a shoestring budget, and a lot of folks in this room. And so, so again, that is pretty much all I'm gonna talk about myself per se today. So the next part of my presentation is going into something that I have been laboring over for years. About 3 years ago, while we were doing work and we were, in the midst of, doing Creative Control Fest, we were a part of some community learning groups, studying African history in America and things like that. My wife was in grad school, and a lot of the unrest around the country had started to unravel. And it was, really, and still is, but it was kind of the impetus for all of the things that, where the uprise was coming from. And so for me, it really began to question, am I doing enough? Yeah, we do creative control. Yeah, we support activism, and we push for diversity and inclusion. But are we doing enough? And if we aren't doing enough, what can we do? And so that really, and she really encouraged me to, research, look at history, right? That is where you find answers. And so she came across a piece by Larry Neal, which was one of the quotes at the beginning, talking about, how art and creativity was tied to some of these movements. How was it being used? How can I use what I do well to push, and fight and resist? And so in that, again, those questions were there in that history. So right at the beginning of this, Du Bois says, of what is the colored artist capable, right? And that was the question that I've been asking myself time over and over again, not colored, of course, because, we don't say that no more. But in 1926, they were saying colored, right? Or Negro, right? And interchangeably, we still do that today, and we'll use other terms, but that question resonates, and it continues to resonate, right? I still don't feel like I'm doing enough. I still know that there are people on the front lines putting their bodies on the line. But how can I use what I do well? How can I start to, push myself? And later in that piece, he also says, we must come to the place where the work of art, when it appears, is reviewed and acclaimed by our own free and unfettered judgment. So he's asking the question, and then he is making a declaration around, where we should be going. Where should we end up? And there's a lot in between those. And I encourage you to go look this article up and read it. Because y'all would be mad if I read that whole thing here. And read it again and again. And I still go back to this, and that opens up the door for other literature and other things to push yourself creatively. And so after kind of going through this and going back and forth, and me and Speak talk pretty much every day. Of course, I talk to my wife every day when she's talking to me. And so half the time I feel like I'm just talking. And she like, okay, Marshall. But, I'm really blessed to have community around me and have built new community around me that push me to think and act more on my inhibitions. David, my brother, that's good to see you, man. Thank you. My studio mate, he's Black 4 too, y'all. And so one of the things I thought about was, they documented the things that they were doing. And no, I don't consider myself a writer. I think it's a great form of art in which to document. But they also have principles that were tied to these movements that they, collectively sort of live by. And those helped to sort of set a framework and foundation for a lot of the movements that were happening at that time. Now, not everybody joined or sometimes it wasn't necessarily tied to any specific movement. You had James Baldwin, who was writing about the movement, but that wasn't necessarily or considered himself a part of any specific organization. And so, I try to take on that challenge, and I had some reticence because of my fear of not being a writer, right? I can draw, I can design something on the computer, and things like that. But today, and HOLLER really was like, okay, I know I'm gonna have some folks in the room that aren't necessarily in my tight network that I don't see on a day-to-day basis. And I thought it was an opportunity to really present a project, an idea, that I have been sort of laboring over for a while. And that is a Black Creatives Manifesto. Woo! I wasn't expecting that. So as I started doing some research and sort of thinking about what a manifesto was, and it wasn't something that I originally thought it was. But as it relates to, art, it is a public declaration of the intentions, motives, or views of an artist or artistic movement. And a regular manifesto is a public declaration of policy and aims, especially one issued before an election by a political party or a candidate. And so, people do personal manifestos and things like that. But we have, really been doing this work for a number of years, and really sort of been using these tools or using these things and this language as we start navigating different spaces, trying to do the work that we do. But we really didn't have anything sort of written down that to reference, when times get hard, or to reference when we are self-doubting or just to know that other people are going through this, right? And I've talked to creatives all over the world, Black creatives specifically, who have very similar experiences. And so this whole idea of a manifesto is not necessarily something that I own. It's just something that I authored, and I would say my community authored, because that's really who I drew from in terms of, the inspiration behind that. And even some of the language verbatim I stole from my family, you know what I mean? And so this is really what I came to present today. And it's really just 12 principles for which I and my immediate community sort of live by. And it's going to be a published document online. And so the idea, and you may be asking yourself, well, how does this affect me? And it may not. It may just be something that you support. It may be principles that you believe in. And so what we're going to do right now is kind of go through these 12 things. And for me, it is what I drew from as I started navigating through different spaces as a Black creative. And I say Black creative, and I know I reference art a lot, but I was very specific and intentional about saying creatives, right? Because for me, creativity is not limited by traditional disciplines of art. You might not be a painter, writer, a craft person, or an architect, but that doesn't inhibit you from creating. And it also doesn't inhibit you from being in certain spaces where you might not feel comfortable, or where you might feel that your creativity is limited. And so creatives for me is the person that is willing to take courage on their ideas. And that could be the person from the street all the way to the academy. I think Speak used the cat that was putting wire hangers on his TV back in the day when antennas were wire hangers, to the person who's writing dissertations at Ohio State off years of research. And so with that, I present to you the Black Creatives Manifesto. And so First principle is unapologetic. We are unapologetically black and creative in whatever those identities, in every way those identities manifest themselves, right? So don't be afraid to own what you create, all right? And I know, because I've experienced, I've done it myself, holding back, not being who you are, creating for what other people want you to create for, or creating what they want you to create. And so be unapologetic about who you are and where you're from and your identity. And if you got questions on the way, I'll try to get through this quick so we have enough time. But I am also open to conversation and dialogue throughout. So if there is something that you just got to get off your chest, don't be afraid to stop me, because I don't want to bore y'all too much, right? We acknowledge the creative wealth in our history, recognize our ancestors' contributions to the world, and accept the torch that has been passed to us. We also acknowledge the significant contributions by our peers. And so that's essentially saying that we honor those who came before us, and we also honor those who are doing great work like HOLLER today. And that is a principle. We tend to, sometimes not want to show love to our neighbor and our peer. But we can't survive that way. We believe that creating it is an act of resistance. So we are committed to never stop creating. I don't draw as much as I used to, in all honesty, right? I don't paint as much as I used to, but I still create, if that makes sense, right? And I think you don't need tools, you don't need the best tools. You don't need a MacBook to create, right? You can find a rock and chalk on the ground if that's the case, but find a way to create even in the most, dismal of situations. But whatever you do, never stop creating. Love, right? We talked about this earlier. We love ourselves, and by extension, we love what we create. We take ownership of what we create, even if it's to be shared, right? A lot of times we create stuff and we just kind of give it away to the world, and the world benefits from it, and a lot of times we're left with nothing. And so part of that is taking ownership of what you create, even if it's not the greatest work, right? Storytelling. We live and die by this, right? We understand that we are the stories we tell, and that we should continue the tradition of telling our stories creatively, authentically, and completely. All right, so whatever you're doing, continue to tell your story, right? And whatever that might be. That shouldn't be two storytellings, but the message is different. Sorry about that. We believe that the realm of creativity goes beyond that of visual and performing arts. Our creativity has broadened the spaces of design, science, innovation, and technology. With this in mind, we acknowledge that while the arts are the expression of culture, they also form the foundation of innovation from the street to the academy, right? And that just goes back to my thoughts around, creativity not necessarily just being tied to art or traditional making. Self-determination, the ability to choose your own destiny. We believe we are free to imagine and create the world in which we want to live, and we will use our art and creativity to resist any opposing forces that stand to hinder our progression, right? That goes back to never stop creating. The fact that you create through adversity is an act of resistance. And that is telling the world that you control your destiny, that you are in control of your destiny, and you want to be in control of your destiny. So never stop creating. And don't be afraid to resist if you feel uncomfortable. If you feel you're in a space where you're not being treated right or where your art is not recognized and valued, find a space where it is, okay? All right, y'all still with me? Huh? Aesthetic, and this kind of lends itself to what Larry Neal was talking about. We understand that the black aesthetic has been vilified while arguably being the most appropriated aesthetic in history. I knew y'all was gonna be on that one, right? We say no more. We believe in creating, validating, acknowledging, and owning our own standards. We will not subscribe solely to Eurocentric ideals of what is good and right.
Oh, yeah.
Me and Adam had a conversation about this the other day, in the ways in which we experience critique as black artists, as creatives. And a lot of times that's through white institutions. And so a lot of times our standard of good and what is right is based on those ideas and those institutions. And if you notice the parallel between this and what Du Bois talked about in terms of defining what your own standards are, and creating on that, there's a brother in Cali, I think his name is Maurice Woods, who's doing some in-depth study around black aesthetic and its influence in design. And so, and he's talking about how black people even ingest certain images differently and certain motifs differently. So own that, y'all, It's okay. A lot of times we base our standards off of what somebody told us was good and right. So it's time that we start to develop these systems and these standards for ourselves, okay? Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with other standards, but, you can create those standards for yourself. Self-care. This is something that, we intentionally talked about, me and Taisha talked about in depth when I was working on this, because it's something that we didn't see in past movements and past resistance. This idea of taking care of yourself while you're fighting, while you're telling your story. And we feel like that's important for us to sustain ourselves, to sustain our communities, to sustain our lives, That was very intentional to put Marshawn up there because he gave so much to the world through his art, through his activism. But sometimes we forget about ourselves too, right? And we can't be strong for our communities if we aren't taking care of ourselves. So we are committed to self-care. This means that we build time for self-love and wellness into our creative process. That means if you got to take a break, or if you got to tell that client it's not going to be here today, and you need to go to Replenish or somewhere and get a massage, do that, right? Or just walk away, take a walk, come over to Blackford Gallery and look at some art in the gallery, right? Even in times of difficulty, right? So you will inevitably face adversity, right? Particularly the Black American experience anything we've created has been created out of adversity. Hip hop, any music, any art, there has been some level of resistance in which we have had to persevere through to make gold, right? And it's been the most profitable gold. One of the biggest exports out of the United States in history is Black culture. And so we have to, really take that into consideration, that this is a part of our process, but even in a part of our process, that adversity that we go through, we have to find places and spaces to take care of ourselves. Make sure you're getting paid for your work, because you gotta live, right? You gotta speak out for our babies, that is a part of self-care. And I know you care about the community. I know you wanna, give back, and that's okay too, but make sure you're taking care of yourself in the process. Affirmation. We believe in affirming our collective Black experiences and contributing to and contributions to the creative landscape. That means whatever intersection you are in the Black community, it should be affirmed. There is no, this is too Black or not Black enough. There is Black. And those experiences come from very many different places. And we want to affirm all those experiences. And I know I've done it. I have a tendency sometimes to be like, that ain't me. I've said that ain't Black, that ain't, but who am I to discount their Black experience? And so, we should do more affirmation of everybody's experiences, even if it is in contrast to ours. Community. We are committed to freedom, building community and creating spaces in which Black people can control their narratives and where our work can be experienced and supported in peace. It should say in peace, or peacefully, I'm sorry. And those who also want to experience our work. And this is the world we're trying to build. And finally, Black futures. We envision a world where Black creators have unlimited access to resources that enable us to create at our highest levels in a free society. So this to me was where I ended, because this is what we haven't seen yet, right? But as creatives, as artists, as people who are fighting, we, through our art, through our creativity, can envision the future we want to see. And that gives us a framework for a future of possibilities, okay? And if you want to endorse this manifesto, you can go to blackcreatorsmanifesto.com and sign your name. It doesn't legally bind you anything, but it is essentially saying that, you know, you believe in this framework, you believe that black creatives should be affirmed and supported, and whether you are black or an ally, or as I like to say, I need accomplices. I need a shooter. You can also support that, right? And that is what I have for you today. I know y'all ain't gonna let me get away that easy. So, questions, comments, feedback.
A rough question.
Okay, I figured you was gonna have the first question.
What, your experience at CCAD, was it totally a good one?
No, I don't think anybody had a totally good experience at
I
CCAD.
threw that word in there.
Yeah, CCAD used to be a very rigorous program. I come from inner city Cleveland. I went to a Cleveland School of Arts, which was 98% black. I came to Columbus, totally different culture, and was dropped in the middle of like white academia. And that was traumatic all within itself. And so the support network that I had home, where, you know, what I created was sort of affirmed just by virtue of the fact that everybody around me was black, that went away. And so that set the foundation for what I would go through at CCAD. So yeah, in short, but it wasn't all bad either. This whole half of the room just about is all the people I knew or met while I was at CCAD. And we, you know, made it work for us. And we were able to, I feel like, change the current in CCAD. The group we started while we were there is the longest lasting student group in CCAD's history. You know, and so, yeah, you know, maybe it wasn't meant for it to be all good.
I got a statement.
Okay.
I just want to affirm you and say thank you for bringing your talents to the city. You know, you're born and raised here in Columbus, Ohio. Your gifts and your talents are very much appreciated. You know, thank you for making a stamp in the city. And I just look forward to seeing what you and your family and the rest of the crew was going to do to really project this city into the next level, and also, you know, taking it home.
Yeah.
When you came to us, take us with you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, you know, I've been here about like, Ty tried to say I'm like Columbus now because I came in 01 and it's like 2017, so it's like literally almost half of my life I've been in Columbus, which is like stupid crazy. So I consider this home. You know, Columbus has really sharpened me. I think Cleveland's prepared me for what I would experience here, but Columbus definitely sharpened me in other ways. So thank you for accepting me. It wasn't acceptance all at first, because y'all Columbus was a different breed when I got here. It was like, who? From Cleveland? Nah, bro, get out of here. But thank you. That means a lot. Hey.
One of those t-shirts.
CCAD. This was an exclusive one that we did in partnership with CCAD. So they have a new store on like Cleveland Avenue. It's called like Ampersand or something. So it's only sold at that one, but we'll have other ones online soon. Oh, Lord.
Come on, wife.
She is my like biggest advocate and critic. So, but that's why I love her and marry her. So.
So I'm coming at you with a relatively easy one. But you talked about your company very briefly, but you didn't necessarily talk about kind of the journey into becoming an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people who are in creative fields, if they had their preference, they would be creating as their primary source of income instead of doing it as a side hustle or as a secondary source of income. So can you just kind of talk about your journey into becoming an entrepreneur, creative entrepreneur, and maybe one good and one bad from that?
Yes, so not for the faint of heart. It is very difficult to be an entrepreneur in general, and I know there's a couple of entrepreneurs in the room that can attest to this. I think a lot of the sharpening that I received in Columbus came through trying to be an entrepreneur. I was in legal trouble coming out of school. That made getting a job a little more difficult. I didn't come out of school and get a job right away at like an agency, so I didn't know how necessarily to run a creative company, although I've always had some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor going on, either on the side or, at full time. The successes that I've had have really been through relationships and people that I've met throughout the years that have supported. So I would say my strength in entrepreneurship has really been building relationships with people. If I have an idea, I tend to find somebody I feel like can help me get that idea. That's how me and Javier met, right? And then I wanted to do a children's book because my son lives in Cleveland and he wrote a children's book for his daughter. And he just accepted me. He was like, yeah, I'll show you. We didn't do the children's book, but we do so much other stuff together. We still working together on stuff. And so so I had this sort of ebb and flow. If you are thinking about, I don't want to get into like all of the steps, but think about marketplace. And I don't want to get like too deep, but people tend to do business with people they are closest to. And if you are a black entrepreneur who primarily lives and works in neighborhoods where there are black people, you will tend to struggle more in business because those communities lack businesses in many cases. So a lot of times you have to go sort of outside of your community to pull the resources that you need, which requires you now coming out of a space where you may be more comfortable and going into spaces where you may not be comfortable, which is why it's so important to have spaces where you can create freely and can create. But when you get into these other markets and these other pools of people who may have the resources that you need to function and build a sustainable business, like I do business with black folks, but to run an agency, and Adam will tell you, these agencies are running $2 million budgets a year. If you got a staff of 20, that's $10,000, $20,000 of overhead and just salary alone a month. So I won't get into like the logistics of like how a business runs and marketplace and all of that, but these are very real realities. And I think as a creative professional, you got to understand that that's business, and then having spaces to create and tell stories is something different. And when those can sort of overlap and align, those are very sort of blessed moments and moments that I would argue not a whole lot of people get to see regardless of race. But if you can start to bring those two closer together, that's the sweet spot. And that may not always look like a whole bunch of money, but what can you do with what you have? So yeah.
What's marketplace?
Buzzword
or is it real?
Marketplace, I mean markets. So groups of people, right? Columbus is there's a map you can pull up. Columbus is very racially segregated. Literally.
Yes, sir.
You can draw the lines. As a result, then Columbus is very economically segregated. So for me, those tend to be marketplaces that people might do business in, right? So a lot of times people don't feel like going all the way to New Albany or Worthington to go to the grocery store, right? Because they don't live there.
Right.
So that's an economics discussion, but that, yeah. So start building your own market. Start building your own pipelines for business. You know, make art and put it out there. Create tech and put it out there. Build relationships. Like I said, most of the people that I still do business with are African American, but a lot of those become funnels for other business. Me and Javier are working on a suicide prevention campaign for the state right now. That didn't come without his relationship. Now the client isn't necessarily a black client, but you know, we're doing good work for low income black people. You know what I mean? And so it really comes back to, you know, your marketplace is really those who are closest to you. So build good relationships with people who want to invest in you, and then figure out how you can add value to them. My man.
How do you navigate scenarios when you are the only one and you want to get other folks to take you serious?
You gotta take yourself serious first. That's just like shooting off the top of my head. I'm doing this startup storytellers event in April. It's like $75 a ticket. So if you can come, cool. If not, I won't be mad. But I found myself, I was joking because I was like, you know, this is like Get Out, right? Anybody saying Get Out? Everybody saying Get Out. I'm like, I'm in a basement at a restaurant and I'm the only black dude in here. And they got me doing like, you know, drama exercises where I'm breathing in and, you know, doing all of this stuff. And I'm like, yo, are they trying to like get me out of breath? Like, you know. So for me, this is why this manifesto was for me first, because I really had to, as I was writing it, as I was doubting myself, as I was doubting whether I would even present it in a public way, I had to go back and reread and live and affirm these principles for myself. That's why I made it, because it's like, you know, this. I need to constantly remind myself that I'm capable, that my ability to do this job is there, and if I know going in that there is already going to be resistance just from my presence there, you know, that's the reality we have to live in. But it's also saying, you know what, I'm not comfortable here, I'll leave. And you can't always do that, but sometimes you can, and sometimes you should, right? And that's for anybody. But, you know, people are going to doubt your ability regardless. It's on you to affirm yourself and find those people that can affirm you. So, you know, if that's something you got to do and build that practice into your own life, like, do it. Because you're here, you know. You still doing what you're doing. I know some of the, you know, just a little bit of time I know you, just what you're doing on your own as a young person. You know what I mean? So just keep pushing, man. Yeah. So we got like 5 minutes. 4. It's okay.
So, doubt is pervasive in the arts community no matter what. And this is clearly something that is to help cope with that and get you to a place where you can move forward if you're at a stopping place. My question is, when you have periods of doubt, how do you feel about the work that comes out of that? And when do you feel most powerful in your work?
I think that produces some of the best work, right? I think that is or most vulnerable work. I didn't want to. I was hoping like 10 people showed up and I knew them, like, right? And they might have been people I kind of told that I was going to do this, so it wouldn't be so much of a surprise. So doubt is a part of the process, I think. But I also think, like, I've heard a term that talks about, doubt or, you know, if you're not nervous, then, you know, that's when you should really be, like, you know, I think Javier says that, like, if you're not nervous before you go or before you're putting something out, like, you probably shouldn't put it out, you know, but this was something, and it's not perfect by any means, you know, it's sort of a working document, a working framework. It will live online. It will be tweaked at some point, but, you know, it was something that I felt was necessary to do, even though I doubted if people would accept it or if people would, you know, buy into it, or if I even bought into it myself at times, you know what I mean? And so I think don't be afraid of doubt, and I think that doubt, or don't even be afraid to fail, you know what I mean? Even if it doesn't do what you wanted to do. But the fact that you put it, or you went and you persevere through that doubt, I think is the true testament to whatever it is you're doing. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Caden had a question?
Right.
Yes.
What's your creative edge right now?
Edge. Define edge for me.
So what I mean, like you talk about your writing, you talk like as an artist, you get these things that you do well that people know you for.
Mhm.
And then it's like we're always expanding. We're always, you know, as creatives, it's like, okay, how can we elevate this?
Yeah. So
there's something that
like writing my.
behind the manifesto. but,
Okay.
like, is it like the writing, or it's like what's the charge behind that manifesto that you created? Like,
To continue the work that we're doing, but take it as far as it can go. I do want to write more. I think because my wife's a wordsmith, like she's a writer and she's constantly pulling out that red pen on me. You know, like I kind of leaned on her a lot for this, but you know, she was purposefully like very hands off and didn't change a whole lot. You know what I mean? Because she wanted this to be something that I did. So for me, like I think that's, you know, and I want to get back to more traditional making. Like you know, I'm an artist at heart. That's where I got my start. I drew and things like that. So I'm finding ways to implement that into like design works. So even how I take notes and things like that, you know. But for me, I think I'm really passionate about employing others, not necessarily economically, but from an opportunity standpoint, or if it's just saying like, we're gonna create a space for us to be comfortable to dialogue about certain things, or we've been, like, a couple of us have been meeting up as just men since the beginning of the year. You know what I mean? So for me, like, if we can get more things like that going, like, I think the creativity will come out. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
No, it does. I just, you know, I look forward to reading what you write.
Yeah.
Put that out there.
Yeah. So that's definitely something I plan to do more of. Yeah. Adam, did you?
Yeah, just piggyback on kind of what she's saying. Like, if this manifesto is the new edge, and you're saying like that you wish you could get back into more art making, the first slide in the whole show is like, you know, a pretty powerful piece of artwork.
Mhm.
Why not take this whole manifesto and design it too? Show it visually.
Yeah, see, Adam always doing it. Be in the studio, like, always putting his charges on me, man. Like, but I did share with him that it's been in me to do I have never done a full body of work and shown on my own, like, as an artist. And so, they've been on me for like years. So that might just be all the brush murals we did over the years. But that's been there too, you know. And so I've been feeling that charge to do that, right?
I'd like to see what you do with it.
Yeah,
Like, make this a visual thing too.
yeah.
You're speaking the language that has visuals that come to mind,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a visual person in general.
Yeah.
Make it so that when somebody comes to this website, they're not just reading words, but they're seeing images that convey.
Yeah.
Hey, holla.
Yes, I agree. Naki.
Okay, so to piggyback on top of that.
There's gonna be a lot of piggybacking in here. Might make me a leather coat.
Last night regarding how inspired I was when I
Yes.
had a chance to see it. And the charge is not only for you, but it actually invigorated me and probably all of us in the room. So this charge is that not only you're creating bodies of work, but all of us as individuals, like creators, are creating the work. And maybe it is a worldwide global campaign that at the end of this, taking on this manifesto as principles of our own living and our own creating, that we produce something. And then it's like, you know, wherever city you're in, you're having a Black Creators Manifesto show, something to show that from this inspiration that you started, you being the catalyst, this is what came from it. That's how the change happened.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know what this looks like in the world. I think for me, it was just about putting it in the world, right? And whatever comes from that, there was no sort of economic thing that I wanted to glean from this. It was really something like, you know, as far as like folks that I talk to on a regular basis, like just things that we, you know, talk about at the coffee shop, and kind of putting that in something that that we can refer to, right? That says like, yo, like we need to be affirming ourselves in our own communities, but maybe there are people outside of here, which is why I published it on the website. So absolutely, like, you know, I don't know how people will receive it, but my thing was like, I need to put this out here, and people can sort of generate however their responses will be to that. And I did think about, I mean, I had to, like, I wanted to present some more art with it. Like, I went in, I was looking, like, Aaron Douglas is like one of my favorite, like, black artists, and I was like looking at it. And then I was like, that's why you see typos in the presentation, because, you know, I kind of get on that wave, and then it's like, no, I need to finish this part. So, so yes, like, I'm very encouraged by y'all showing up today and just you know, receiving me and receiving this, and even if you don't like it, I'm good with that too. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta be good with that, right? Because it's not for everybody to like. You know, it's you know, it's there for that dialogue, and so you know, I'm hoping that however it lives out here, that it will encourage and inspire somebody to start creating. I don't want to manage the world. You know, we see what's going on right now. So
I have something really quick. So
yes.
I don't know he was an artist. I know he was a designer. So
yeah.
It's very interesting for me to see this. I would love to see you come back to our schools and talk to our black designers and other people of color, because it's a different kind of atmosphere, especially given the kind of university settings that we are in. We get that opportunity through Barnett Center and other spaces, but it would be extremely important, and like if you came to the school.
I love to. Yeah. Me and Brian Stone had talked about that too. Yeah.
Cool.
So I think it's gonna be in the works.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, and y'all could come to Creative Control Fest this year too. Just a soft plug. And the second week of September here in Columbus, Ohio. So, yes. Anybody else? All hearts, minds clear? Are we ready for the benediction? Did I see a hand back there? No, okay, all right.
Hey, well, real quick.
Oh.
People say like real successful people don't speak. They'll turn it over. No, flip it.
You had it up.
They say real successful people don't speak. They're spoken for. But speak for yourself and tell us about like some of the stuff you're doing nationally, all over the state. Because like one of the things, like what my man talked about, I think, and I got this from Tom Burrell. What's making Marshall successful is, in his mind and heart, I don't think he just wants to be the best black designer. He wants to be the best designer, period. And so because of that drive, we're able to do stuff all, you know, not just in Columbus, not just locally. And so just brag about yourself and some of the stuff like you're doing.
Well, I'm doing Holler for one, you know. Everybody ain't get picked for Holler, you know. Yeah, so, man, it's a lot. We kind of heard about what we do at Creative Control Fest, but from a business standpoint, me and Javier have been working on a number of campaigns around, like, mental health and
just say Javier, or just say Marshall, because I'm writing
else. And suicide prevention and mental health within black and poor communities across the state. We worked on campaigns in New Jersey around sexual health for youth. We're working on a mentor campaign for the city of Columbus through the school district. And is that what you?
What are you doing
with White House?
What are you doing with John Jennings?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a panel. John Jennings is professor and prolific artist. He has a second edition of his Black Comics book coming out. So support that on Kickstarter. But I'll be on a panel with him. I forget where it's at. I want to say California somewhere. It's an academic panel around black artists.
Baltimore.
Yes, we're working on a campaign in Baltimore. That was a sexual health campaign.
No, that was opioids.
That's the opioid campaign. campaign. So around, and just learning a lot, right? So opioids are introduced to their, people get introduced by family members, and we were charged with developing the creative and the focus groups and all of the elements and assets that'll go with those campaigns in Baltimore. And so, I'm really blessed right now working with the city and the mayor's office.
You have a TED Talk online.
Oh yeah, I did a TED Talk in November. Check that out. Making Midwest. Check that out.
He's so used to humble bragging, he never really knows.
Yes, MBK is out of the White House. We are working on our Ohio campaign, hopefully leveraging that to sort of launch this nationally and get support from it nationally. So beyond mentorship, healthy coping for people who deal with trauma on a day-to-day basis. Living in certain neighborhoods is just traumatic. There are studies that show Black people are incepted into trauma, if that's the correct word, right? So by mere virtue of the fact that you are conceived as a person of color in America, studies show that you are experiencing trauma in the womb, which is just ridiculous. So we're doing a lot of work in that space right now, with the hopes to bring that back here, and with the hopes of creating space for ourselves, to be free of some other stuff so we can create freely. So, yes, I think, is that it? I got a 1-year marriage anniversary coming up in July. And next Saturday I'll be turning 34, so we might kick it, y'all. And I'll be breaking my fast from drinking, so. Whiskey. No. I think that is my time, so I will turn it back over to Scott.